Hello and welcome to episode 65 of our SAP on Azure Video Podcast. Today is October 29th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So today we continue our community stories across the globe. After having SAP on Azure community folks from South Africa, from the UK, from Germany, we are now heading over into the Asia Pacific region. I'm really glad that I could convince Denny to join us today. But before Denny will talk about his journey to Microsoft, we will, as always, take a quick look at the news from this week. And the first thing that I want to start with is a blog post by Carsten Strothmann. So I think a few episodes back, we had talked about the extended partnership initiatives that are happening between SAP and Microsoft. And we talked about eventing being one part of the things that we have been working on for the past few months. And now we are actually ready to start with a few customers. So if you want to, or if you are interested in event-driven architectures, and if you want to send events from SAP to Microsoft and from Microsoft to SAP, and you want to test it out or influence also the direction where we are going, then SAP just started an SAP Customer Engagement Initiative. And in this initiative, you have to have an NDA in place, a feedback agreement in place, but SAP will help you obviously throughout these process to get onboarded. If you do that, then you can join this Customer Engagement Initiative where SAP and Microsoft, where we will work with you, where we'll show you what's happening, where you can get then access to early bits and try it out. So if you are interested in these event-based architectures, then make sure to sign up to the Customer Engagement Initiative. Actually, the link to sign up is here in the comments. Or where is it? Yeah, here. There's a link to the Customer Engagement Initiative, and from there you can just register and apply for the SAP and Azure event integration. Okay. The next thing is a very interesting blog post again from Microsoft Digital. So I really enjoy how open Microsoft Digital is communicating what they're doing, how they're doing it, how they're migrating their landscapes to Azure, how they're consuming and adapting to new Azure services. And obviously, we had already quite a few folks from Microsoft Digital joining us and talking about their experience. But this scenario that I now want to talk about was mentioned already by some of the colleagues, especially I think when we also talked about migrating the whole SAP infrastructure to Azure. But here, Peter Apple talks about using a screen test for their migration to Azure. And the really funny thing is, first of all, I thought, well, what does it mean? What does this screaming mean? But they have a really interesting approach. So when they had their environments on premises, they obviously wanted to migrate these servers to Azure, but they also wanted to make sure to really only migrate the servers that are required. So what they did is, and that's part of this screen test, is they first of all started by putting a message on all the servers. So, hey, is this your server? Contact us. So if you would log on to your server, then you would see this message, and of course you would say, yeah, I need this the server, and everything would be fine. Now, if you didn't react to this message, then they would start to restart the server once a day. So if the server was in use, but you wasn't just logging onto the server to check this message, then all of a sudden the server would be down, and obviously you would start screaming. You would say, oh, my server is down. So with this, Microsoft Digital would know, oh, okay, this server is in use. This is really relevant. This is something that we also need to consider to migrate to Azure. And then they put in even more drastic measures. So they shut down the server for 2 weeks and so on. And only if still no one screamed, then the server would be retired. Obviously, storage would be retained, so just in case. But by doing these 4 steps, they were able to save 15% of the infrastructure on premises by just performing these steps. And I mean, theoretically, you could also perform these steps on premises, even if you don't intend to migrate to the cloud. But I just thought this was a really, really interesting method that Microsoft Digital did there to see what servers are in use and to optimize the migration of servers into Azure. And he continues to talk about how to work with oversizing, to really monitoring the CPU load of the servers and stuff like that. But this screaming thing, obviously, that's something that stood out for me, because I thought that was a really interesting concept to evaluate which servers are still in use. The next thing is a blog post from Martin Pankratz again. Now, this time, he continues the story about private link. But actually, I think he combines in this blog post two of his favorite topics right now. So the private link and the principal propagation. And obviously, if you have followed the blog post from Martin Repple about principal propagation, so basically the user who signs in on the application, maybe via Azure Active Directory, on a Teams or on a chatbot or whatever, should also be the user that signs into the SAP system in the backend. And for this, you really need to propagate the user principal from one side to the other. Now, obviously, if you think of the private link service that is currently in beta on the SAP Cloud platform, on the SAP Business Technology platform, then it totally makes sense to combine these two scenarios, that you have a very secure connectivity between your BTP and your SAP system running on Azure, but at the same time, you also want to have principal propagation to really make sure that the users that are using this private link service are propagated to the SAP system. Now, he starts by talking, well, that should be fairly easy, but then it's not. There are some challenges, and then he really explains in detail how you need to separate these two authentication processes, and he has some very nice flow charts here where the whole authentication flow is displayed. And like always, he has he has even some Postman collections where you can really test this out. But then he also has the things on his GitHub repository again. So somewhere there's a link to his GitHub repo somewhere. Somewhere here is the GitHub repo where you can find all this. It's a little more complicated than setting up private link. But if you have these requirements that you already want to test private link, and you have the requirement for principal propagation, then I think, Martin, he always writes very extensive, very detailed blog posts. So then this is definitely something that you can follow to implement principal propagation also with private link. Good, then moving on, talking about GitHub repos and GitHub in general. We just had the GitHub Universe 2021. I have to admit, I wasn't able to watch any sessions yet, but there's this summary blog post, everything new from Universe 2021. So it's a nice write-up of some of the things, or the things that were announced during GitHub Universe. Again, I have not yet really read through this. I just scanned over it. So GitHub Code Spaces, GitHub Copilot, obviously some things that we talked about also in our show before immediately came into mind. But then also there's the discussions, the GitHub discussions. There's some new announcement around this. If I find some time, I'll definitely go into more details here to see what's going on or what was announced. But just as a reminder that there's this nice overview of what was happening at GitHub Universe 21. Not necessarily directly related, but still something newsworthy. I think that was mentioned also in the previous weeks. Visual Studio Code, there's now a web preview. So if you go to vscode.dev, you have an editor in the browser. So since I just also mentioned GitHub Code Spaces, there is a similarity, and there's actually a nice blog post that outlines the differences, the different approaches of Visual Studio Code in the browser and GitHub code spaces. I think here the great thing is you can work here in the browser. You can also connect to files locally, so on your PC basically that you want to work with. You can also work with GitHub repositories. So I don't remember the exact syntax, but if I think enter here /GitHub and then enter the repo name or something like that, it would also open up in Visual Studio Code. So I think especially if you
you have it there, open repository link.
Yeah.
A little bit right before below the Visual Studio Code text. Oh, there. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, yeah, perfect. Exactly. Great. Thank you, Gordon. Yeah. So it's fairly easy then to work from here. And what I see really as a huge opportunity, if you look what GitHub did internally with GitHub code spaces and how they enabled their developers now to really use these development environments in a browser and not having everyone to install and run and have all the dependencies on their local laptop to do development. I really think going forward, this will be super helpful. If you think of really Visual Studio Code, for example, with all the SAP extensions to create SAP Fiori applications, or to also, as what Martin Pankratz showed us a few episodes ago, how you can also interact with your ABAP stack on this. I think this will become really, really interesting. And obviously, it's interesting to see also where this is then going with the Business Application Studio from SAP. Now, speaking about Visual Studio Code, I already mentioned sometimes back the Azure tips and tricks. And honestly, the more time I spend on this GitHub repo, the more excited I am, because here, for example, there's one about Azure API management, from how to use Azure API management from Visual Studio Code, and it's a really detailed tutorial. It's really a nice guide that shows you a few things, how to get started, how to use it, and in this specific case. And again, there's tons of information here on what you can do with Azure. So if you have not yet, make sure to check out this Azure tips and tricks on GitHub.io here. Good. With this, let's switch over to some announcements and news. I mean, Ignite is coming up. We talked about this. I hope everyone has already registered. But I also found another interesting thing, and that's the Cloud Skill Challenge. So if you want, apparently during Ignite, so starting November 2nd, there will be 12 challenges available. If you take a look at them, and if you pick one of these challenges, and if you complete these challenges, you can get a Microsoft certification voucher for your certifications, obviously. So I don't know what it is all about, but I'm looking forward to these challenges. Maybe there's hopefully there's some fun challenges in there where you can learn also about Azure. And if you do that, then yeah, you can get some free certification exams here. Okay, with this, only 3 more podcasts that I want to mention, and it's really interesting, or it's really fun. So Azure Friday, I guess a lot of you know Azure Friday, and for 8 years now, Azure Friday has been producing videos every Friday, obviously. And there was a link on Twitter to the very first episode that Scott Hanselman did, 8 years ago, where he talks about, here you can still see Windows Azure, the old user interface of the Azure portal. It's a nice quick video. It's only 6 minutes or so. He talks about how to create a website, and it's nice to see a 8-year younger Scott Hanselman talking about, look, he's trying now to have this weekly show, and yeah, it turned out to really work out well. So 8 years later, we still have Azure Friday. So let's see where we are going, Goran, with our podcast.
Yeah. We are also kind of Friday.
Yeah, we're also Friday, but we're not 8 years yet.
We are not yet 8 years. Yeah.
We need a little more time. Yeah, but there's also another SAP on Azure Talk podcast. I think we talked about Ravi and Nathan also already in the past. They have some fantastic short podcasts where they started to talk to each other, basically, talk about certain topics there. But now they also pulled in special guests, and in this episode, they're talking about what do successful SAP on Azure customers do. So they have some colleagues from the support organization as well, and some other colleagues from Azure attending in this specific episode, and it's a really I mean, a lot of their episodes are really great, but I immensely enjoyed this one as well, because there are a lot of interesting behind the scenes discussions there. What do we see from a support organization, how customers are running SAP on Azure, and it's definitely it's 25 minutes, so it's fairly short, so it's definitely worth listening into to this episode and to the podcast in general. And then one last podcast that I want to highlight, simply because it's also really amazing where they are already. So the Azure Podcast, so not SAP, the Azure Podcast has its 400th episode. And like always, they have guests attending the Azure Podcast, and this time they have Girish Bablani joining, who is the CVP of Azure Core. So basically, he's responsible for the Azure Compute, Azure Networking, Azure Storage, and he talks a little about his daily life, what is his daily work looking like, and some of the challenges, and also he provides an outlook. What does he think customers will use, or Azure looks like in 5 years or so? So it's also a very interesting episode. And 400s, that's really a huge number of episodes. So we're only at 65 at the moment, but let's see where we are going. Okay, so that's all for the news for this week that I had. With this, let me actually hand over to Denny. So Denny, maybe before we talk about your journey to Microsoft and what you're doing, and so maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll take it from there and ask you some hard questions.
Thank you, Holger. Hi, Goran, and all the audience. So a little bit about me. My name is Denny Huang. I am SAP on Azure Principal Specialist from Global Black Belt team in Microsoft. I'm based in Singapore. I joined Microsoft about 4 years ago now. And my motto in my LinkedIn page is actually SAP on Azure made easy, right? So I like to help people to understand or to deploy SAP on Azure. It is not a complex solution. Everybody can do it. If I can do it, then actually, everybody can do it too.
But you are a global black belt, so that definitely means something.
Yeah, it's just a title, I guess.
But it's a great title, and I think we were almost joined at the same time, Microsoft, and we started both in the global black belt team, and I think that was really for me it was a very interesting, a very very fascinating time, and it's great that you're still driving this topic forward. And I'll make sure to reference your LinkedIn page, because I have to admit I didn't look at it as a preparation, but I'll definitely reference it so that others can also see your LinkedIn profile. And I like your title there, because you're right. SAP on Azure is easy.
Yeah. I still have a T-shirt from the Global Black Belt team, with the karate, whatever that one,
cool.
the outfit. Yeah. I think it's pretty cool.
Really nice.
I'm thinking of wearing it, but then it's actually just a T-shirt, so I'm not sure whether it's polite enough for this occasion. Maybe I'll
Look at
wear it
me.
next
So
time.
that's cool. So you joined Microsoft 4 years ago. So what did you do before that? Before you joined Microsoft?
Yeah, before I joined Microsoft, I spent more than 15 years with practically global consulting companies, including SAP. And out of those 15 years, I actually worked as an independent contractor for 12 years.
Wow.
So yeah, it was actually quite a convenient working as independent contractor. But somehow, sometime, I thought that the time was right. I was convinced that the cloud is the future of SAP. And when I saw that there was an opportunity with a leading cloud provider, I just jumped right into it. And luckily, I went through several rounds of interviews, and here I am.
Now that's
Cool.
interesting that you say you see cloud as a future. So why do you say in the context of SAP, for example?
Yeah, so as I said, I started many years ago in SAP, started from data center. I also actually work in a few of the government, linked SAP project.
Mhm.
When you consider, let's say, the security, just take one aspect, security, right? Which is very basic. Everybody knows how important security is. In fact, here in Singapore, we had in the years before COVID, there were a few high-profile breaches. I think even until today, from time to time, we also still heard about breaches. So we know security is very important. And when I compare the security that we have on-premise versus the cloud, right? Especially now, I have been on a data center tour, for example, in Microsoft. It's really, you can't compare these two things.
Yeah.
So
And I think that is something that is really, really interesting because especially here in Germany, for example, a few years ago, actually probably when I joined Microsoft, a lot of customers were saying, no, 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 I'm not going into the cloud. On-premise is much more secure. I will not go into the cloud. If I talk to a lot of customers now, this has completely changed. A lot of customers are going in the cloud because of security. And I think all the investments that we're doing, this is so mind-blowing. I mean, if you just look at what we're doing with Azure Active Directory, with the multi-factor authentication, or now really going passwordless or something like that. If we look at the work that we're doing with Sentinel, and also with Sentinel for SAP, for example, if we're doing all the work around ransomware protections, about so there's so many things that Microsoft is doing in this area, which I think as a customer on premise, yeah, I can probably do some of this, but it's a lot of work, and in the cloud, you get this, I mean, more or less for free. Microsoft is really looking after this. It's really investing, is providing a lot of features and functionalities, and you can just activate these functionalities. It's really amazing. But so basically what you're saying is before joining Microsoft, you didn't have a lot of cloud experience.
yeah, you can say that. But also, actually, my first interaction with the cloud happened about probably 10 years ago, right?
Oh,
So that was with a local private cloud, if you
mhm,
like to say it. So we did an implementation of SAP on Azure for one of the customers here in Singapore. And
mhm,
after that successful implementation with the local cloud, I went on with several more deployments on another hyperscaler.
mhm.
So when I joined Microsoft, when I actually was applying for the job, I actually didn't have any Azure experience. Yeah, it's it's a bit worrying for me, but also I understand that actually it will be easy or not very difficult to actually learn Azure once you know how it works in another hyperscaler, in another cloud, because basically again SAP is still infrastructure as a service, right? And you also have a crash course. If you know one cloud, it's very easy for you to actually learn about the other cloud. Yeah, the building blocks are more or less the same. It's just different names, different terminology between one and the other. So, but there are also a few things that I hoped I knew. There were a few tricks that I learned now that if I knew it before, right, actually I would be able to maybe deploy or operate or running it better, right? Yeah, so take for example, the Azure Load Balancer, right? How it actually works with our clustering technology. It allows us to do a seamless failover, automatic failover, just like on-premise. So when I deployed this solution a few years ago, I didn't know about it. And furthermore, also it's actually not Azure. So I still had to do some manual adjustment on DNS, or if now the routing table, whenever the failover happens, right? But we don't have to deal with it on Azure. And I think that is really a big plus point.
Yeah, I think what resonates there very well with me, even if you're not an Azure specialist there when you join Microsoft, I think one thing is, obviously at Microsoft we have a fantastic community and we have experts on Azure that we can always ask. I think what is missing, and that's the value add that you and a lot of other folks actually bring, is your SAP expertise. That's something that's not native there, I would say, in Microsoft, obviously, because we are Microsoft, we're developing Azure and whatever, but you bring in this deep SAP expertise and combining this with Azure, that's where the real value is, and that's again also coming back to the community aspect, where I'm so glad to be in Microsoft and in this specific area of SAP and Microsoft, where we really have experts on the network level. We have experts, storage, compute, but then SAP functions in SAP, business process in SAP. So we have really a fantastic community, and we have, we can just reach out to colleagues like you, and someone will help us and find an answer. So now you are a global black belt and an SAP on Azure specialist. What would you say? How is this different working from your previous consultant work that you had?
Yeah, interesting question. I think it's more or less the same. But yeah, when we are basically helping our customers to solve their business challenge. And there are some differences in my approach now compared to last time. So as a consultant, I would usually have well-defined scope of work. Some of our customers also, they want us to help them to choose the best solution. They do not want to know the details, right? They may not have the time to actually learn about things or read all the lengthy manuals. So we just trust you as a consultant to pick me the best solution for my problem, right? While as Azure specialist now, we know there are many ways to a problem solving, and we need to make sure that our partners, our customers are aware of all the available options. We need to broaden their views, because in the end, only they know what is best for them, right? So with all this knowledge that they know, that they know is available on Azure, maybe actually they can come up with a solution that sometimes we never think of.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But you are in Singapore, which is basically Asia Pacific, right? So how do you see there SAP on Azure? How is going the adoption? How is the challenges? What the customers are asking for? Because I always think, somehow EMEA or especially Germany, you know, in the beginning,
Yep.
cloud, no.
Yep.
And I always hear the story, you know, Asia Pacific, it's different, totally different. They're much more open. That's what I heard from other people. So how is in your experience?
Yeah, well, Asia region in the context of Microsoft is very huge, right? So let me first start with ASEAN. I hope you know what ASEAN is. So ASEAN is Association of Southeast Asia nations. There are 10 countries in ASEAN, and it is home to more than 600 million people, right, spread across these 10 countries.
Okay.
But different to EU, European Union, we have different demographics, no like economic community zone or anything, different regulation, like, you know, you have GDPR for better or worse, we don't, right? And each country may introduce its own data sovereignty, data regulation, right? So in this part of the world, it is basically a race to have a region there, have a data center, have a presence there. So we recently announced that we will have two new Azure regions within ASEAN. One is in Indonesia, and another one is in Malaysia. I'm not sure whether there will be another announcement in for another country in ASEAN. I hope so. I really hope so,
Okay.
because that's how I see it for ASEAN. It is pretty much race to have the data center, to have the local presence there at the moment.
Yeah. Well, basically, Microsoft strategy is to have a data center in each country, even, right? So step by step. And I'm seeing this is kind of happening in your area. Yeah, nice.
Right. And then next to South Korea, Japan, and Greater China region, I think these are similar, mostly advanced economy, high-tech semiconductor, electronic manufacturing. So we are doing very well there. So RISE, for example, RISE with Azure in mainland China, right? So that is thriving, that is going very well. Um, I think almost every week we have a new customer coming for RISE with Azure in China. So to be honest, we have to cope with the demand, right? I think there will be a lot of shipping of the hardware of the M series in particular to China to just meet the demand from SAP alone, right? So this is not counting the non-RISE customers. So we are doing very well there. And we also announced a new Azure region, right? The upcoming new Azure region in Taiwan for the growing market there. Yeah, and India. So next is India. India also has a huge potential with more than 1.2 billion people there. We have 3 regions in India. So that is a complete support for BCDR. And we've also landed our MV2 up to 12 terabyte in India now for our largest customers there. And last but not least is Australia and New Zealand. Perhaps not as many people as the rest of Asia, but still very prominent with technology. And we also announced a new upcoming Azure region in New Zealand. And I feel that our story of extend and innovate and integration with SAP through Power BI, Power Apps, Power Platforms, Azure Synapse, Data Lake, and also Microsoft Teams really gathering pace in this part of the world. So I'm really thrilled with what you've been doing with this podcast, introducing those capabilities to a wider audience to speed up the adoption to a lot of customers. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Denny. But honestly, thank you so much for sharing that, because if I look at myself, I mean, I very well know what's happening in Germany and in Europe, and I'm interacting with lots of customers in this region. Similar in the US, I'm fairly well connected there. Obviously, the headquarters is in Redmond, so we have a lot of contacts in there. To some extent, India. I mean, I'm working with a few colleagues there in India, in Hyderabad, in our development centers. But what you just outlined, I wasn't, or it's always good to be reminded again how many people are living in this area, how important also SAP is in these areas, how fragmented. Honestly, I wasn't aware that there are so many in this Asian region, that there are so many different countries, and they have their own regulations, that they have their own compliances probably and stuff like that. I wasn't really aware of that. So it's and again, for me, that shows this breadth and power that we have in our community, that we have experts like you that help customers there with your expertise, that help them and guide them through how to get started with SAP. What is an MV2 and whatever. So that's really amazing. So I'm thanks for sharing all of this. It's really interesting.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and I remember there, I mean, one of the first big customer there from this region, from Malaysia, from Australia, really the big one. So really the tough one. That was even 6-7 years ago, I think, when I was joining Microsoft. So do you have anything like your best customer case you can share? Maybe something that we publish as well from your side.
Right. Yeah, talking about the case study, I think this one is public already. It's about a pharmaceutical company named Zulik Pharma. So
Okay.
Zulik Pharma is a pharmaceutical distribution company. They went with Azure for their S/4HANA journey. So it was started with a DB2 migration to Suite on HANA back in 2018. I think they were one of the first SAP on Azure customers in Southeast Asia, and definitely the first to implement or to deploy the active cluster. It was a successful implementation. I was really proud, very happy with it. And yeah, I mean, I think it's also lucky enough for them to be on cloud, because you know what happened when pandemic started. The demand for pharmacies really shot up, right? And they need to actually increase their capacity. And when they were on Azure, it's very easy for them to move from a 4 terabyte MV1 to a 6 terabyte MV2, right? I don't think you can make that switch very easily, especially with the pandemic, a very restricted movement. Last time, nobody can come and go in and out of the country. But yeah, with Azure, it is actually just basically a flick of a button, and then you move from 4 terabyte to 6 terabyte. And now, if they say 6 terabyte is not enough, then they can go to the next size that is available on Azure. So really, I think this story, the real use case of how scalable, how flexible, how easy it is to implement SAP on Azure, and also you can actually meet whatever requirements that you have, right? With basically just SAP on Azure made easy.
Nice. Cool. If I remember correctly, they are also in Singapore data center.
Yes, they are in Singapore data center. You are right. So it's 12,000 users. So yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not supposed to divulge a lot of of this information. So yeah, I will probably stop there. But yes, it is in Singapore.
But it's good to hear that was a successful project and that everything was working fine. Cool.
Yes, I think
when I think this kind of resize to get more resources by click, it sounds trivial or nothing, but actually, if you think on premises, ordering that would mean typically ordering a new hardware, which takes 3, 4, 5 months to get it. And as you mentioned, in pandemic, there's still a challenge to produce the stuff, right? Could also mean even more time, and here is just click it and that's it, you get it, right? And that's really a game changer for the business running on the cloud. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, Denny, I think that was a lot of fantastic insights, and again, I really appreciate you coming on the show to give your perspective on your journey, but also to provide us with some insights in the Asia region and what's happening there. Again, at least from my perspective, I do have some interaction with some customers there, but far too little, I guess, than what I should, because there's so much happening there. And yeah, it's good that we have colleagues like you working in this region to help our customers and partners there.
It's a pleasure for me, Holger and Goran. So thank you very much for the opportunity you've given me. I'm really excited when you came up to me and say, "Hey, Denny, can you, be our guest in the next SAP on Azure podcast?" I think really appreciate it. And thank you once again. I mean, I definitely use some of the podcast and some of the videos from your demo, to show to our prospective customers what they can do
Nice.
when they move their SAP to Azure with all the integration, with all the innovation that we can bring to the table. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Good. With this, let's wrap up our show today. Thank you, and maybe Denny, in a few years, we'll invite you again, maybe to our 800th episode or something.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Cool, great. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.